They thought they had control. Two officers pulling over a lone driver ready to flex their authority. But what they didn't realize was that the woman behind the wheel wasn't just any driver, she was their new boss, the chief of police. And this stop was about to turn their world upside down. Monica Reynolds had always been a woman of quiet resilience, someone who understood the weight of struggle and the power of perseverance. Today marked a milestone, her first day as the chief of police in Brookdale, a position she had fought tooth and nail to earn. The road to this moment hadn't been easy. She had battled systemic bias, shattered expectations, and now she was stepping into a department that had a long, troubling history of racial discrimination. The early morning sun cast a golden hue over the city skyline as she drove into town, her fingers gripping the steering wheel just a little tighter than usual. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, but a gnawing unease clung to her. Brookdale's police force had been resistant to change for decades, and she knew there were plenty within the ranks who weren't thrilled about her appointment. A black woman leading their department? She had heard the whispers, the barely concealed disdain. Just as she approached a traffic light, red and blue lights suddenly flooded her rearview mirror. A patrol car was right behind her, sirens blaring. Monica's heart didn't race, but she felt the familiar weight of frustration settle over her. She had spent a lifetime preparing for moments like these. This wasn't a coincidence. She pulled over, the crunch of gravel beneath her tires filling the quiet stretch of road. Two officers, both white, stepped out of the cruiser. The senior officer, Lieutenant Greg Saunders, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, moved with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The younger officer, Officer Brian Tate, trailed behind, his posture rigid, his gaze already filled with suspicion. Monica lowered her window, her expression calm but unreadable. Saunders leaned slightly toward her window, scanning the car before his eyes locked onto her. "License and registration," he said flatly, his voice carrying the well-practiced authority of a man who expected obedience. Without a word, Monica reached into the glove compartment, retrieving the documents. She had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than words in moments like this. As she handed them over, she caught the slight narrowing of Saunders' eyes. He wasn't saying much, but Tate? He wasn't as composed. "What brings you out here?" Tate asked, his tone edged with something more than simple curiosity. "This area isn't exactly safe, if you know what I mean." The subtlety was gone. Monica's stomach clenched, but her face remained neutral. "I'm on my way to work." "And where exactly would that be?" Tate pressed, leaning in, a smug grin tugging at the corner of his lips as if he had already made up his mind about her. She considered revealing her title right then and there, ending this charade. But she held back. She had been in this position too many times before, had seen this exact playbook. The power dynamic here was crystal clear, and she wanted to see just how far they were willing to take it. "You'll find out soon enough," she said coolly, meeting his gaze head-on. There was no anger in her voice, no defiance, just a simple, unwavering confidence. Saunders, sensing the rising tension, stepped forward. "Let's not make this difficult, ma'am. We can take this further if need be." There it was, the unspoken threat, the flex of power. Monica inhaled slowly, steadying herself. She had fought too hard, climbed too high to let this slide. "Yes." "That won't be necessary," she said, her voice like steel. "I'm Chief Monica Reynolds, and I strongly suggest you rethink how you're handling this situation." Silence slammed down like a hammer. Saunders' expression faltered, confusion flickering across his face as the realization hit him like a gut punch. Tate's smirk vanished in an instant, replaced by wide-eyed panic. "Yoji?" Saunders stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Monica affirmed, her posture unshaken. "And now, I'd like to know exactly why I was stopped, and why this line of questioning was necessary." For a moment, neither officer spoke. Tate shifted uncomfortably, grasping for an excuse, but the damage was already done. The power dynamic had shifted, and they knew it. Lieutenant Greg Saunders cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. There must have been a misunderstanding. Monica Reynolds didn't let him finish. "No, this isn't a misunderstanding," she interrupted, her tone sharp. "This is exactly the problem. You stop people like me without cause, make assumptions, and try to flex your authority because you think you can get away with it." Saunders opened his mouth to protest, but quickly realized there was nothing he could say to justify their actions. He knew she was right. Monica's calm, unflinching demeanor only made their behavior look worse. "You see," she continued, locking eyes with both officers, "it's officers like you who make people distrust the system, and it's people like me who are here to change that." Silence hung heavy in the air. Officer Brian Tate shifted uneasily, his previous confidence now completely drained. The weight of the moment sank in. This wasn't just about Monica. This was about every person who had been unjustly stopped, questioned, and harassed simply because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of who belonged in certain spaces. She stepped out of her car, standing tall as she addressed them. "You'll be reporting to me personally for the next few weeks. I'll be reviewing every traffic stop you make, and I suggest you think long and hard about how you handle yourselves from now on." Saunders finally found his voice. We didn't mean any disrespect, Chief. It won't happen again." Monica nodded, though she knew his words were empty. It would happen again. Not with them, perhaps, but with others. That was exactly why she was here, to root out the deep-seated prejudice that had plagued Brookdale's police force for too long. "Good," she said quietly, before turning back to her car. As she drove away, Monica allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had won this round, but there would be many more battles ahead. Her position as chief of police was more than just a title. It was a responsibility to ensure that no one else had to endure what she had just experienced. Later that day, Monica gathered the department for her first official meeting. The tension in the room was thick as she stood in front of dozens of officers, her presence commanding attention. She recounted the events of that morning, leaving nothing unsaid. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," she began, her voice steady. "But I am here to make it clear that this kind of behavior stops now." A murmur of unease swept through the room, but Monica didn't flinch. She had spent her life fighting for justice, and she wasn't about to stop now. Every officer in this department will be held accountable for how they treat the citizens of Brookdale, regardless of their race, gender, or background. Some officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in quiet agreement. Monica could already tell who was ready to stand with her and who wasn't. But that didn't matter. She was ready for the challenge. "This is your chance to prove that you are the kind of officers who serve with integrity," she continued. "But make no mistake, I will not tolerate bias, I will not tolerate disrespect, and I will not tolerate anyone who thinks they are above the law." Silence filled the room. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances while others sat motionless, absorbing every word. Over the coming weeks, word of Monica's encounters spread throughout the community. For some, it was a sign that change was finally coming. For others, it was a wake-up call. The media caught wind of the story, and soon Chief Monica Reynolds became a symbol of what Brookdale needed. Someone unafraid to stand up to injustice. Someone determined to reform a broken system. But Monica knew this was only the beginning. Every stop, every encounter, every decision she made would be scrutinized. But she was ready. She hadn't fought all these years just to stay silent now. The fight for justice was far from over. But in that moment, as she drove away from those two humbled officers, Chief Monica Reynolds knew one thing for certain. She was exactly where she needed to be.